show, taking your business from seed to sapling to towering giant, with your hosts, best-selling author and business growth experts Noah Fleming and Shawn Veltman. This is the only show that gives you proven, pragmatic, and immediately applicable business growth strategies every week in 15 minutes or less. Here's Noah and Shawn.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of our podcast. This is your host, Noah Fleming, and my co-host, Mr. Shawn Veltman. Shawn, where are you in the world today? And tell me, what is it like out? Is it a nice day?
No, I'm in beautiful Calgary, Alberta, and it is sunny here as it is 333 days a year. So I am doing pretty fantastic.
So today we're going to talk about something pretty interesting. We're going to talk about the way management might spend time worrying about factors that they have no control over. More importantly, sort of managing the unmanageable, trying and spending time and thinking about managing the unmanageable. And you had a great story about this, about a CFO you were working with years ago. Can you share that with us and then tell us, really what we're going to talk about today?
Sure. So this was many, many years ago. It was one of the first companies that I was working with. And the CFO there, he later became a really good friend of mine, but he was not always easy to work with in the office setting. He was very to the point, I suppose is the polite way to put it. And I'll never forget, I was within my first couple months, and somebody was demonstrating to him this beautiful new software they had to do reporting, and they said, yeah, it's got hundreds of reports. Look at all the stuff that you can see. And I remember he scrolled through it and he looked through maybe half a dozen reports. And then he yelled at the guy who was showing. He said, "This is garbage. Get this out of here. I don't want to see this again." And I was surprised. And I asked him, "What's this about?" And he said, "Shawn, those are all vanity analytics. There's nothing there that helps me actually manage what I'm doing. It gives me a report to have a report there. It makes it feel like I'm doing something, but not one of those would help me make a decision." And as the years have gone on, I've really appreciated that perspective, and I've tried really hard in any organization I've worked in or worked with or started to ensure that any report had a clear action sign at the end of it. If you're a manager and you're looking at a report and you don't have a clear vision of what to do after you read that report, it was wasted time. It was a vanity analytic.
So I think a couple things come to mind. One is we're living in a day and age of vanity analytics from every direction we can find them. I mean, every day there's a new startup or something that's offering some sort of, tool or reporting mechanism or something that it's really hard to see what the value of that is. I mean, we've played around with so many different tools, sales tools, CRMs, and what we've found is that most of them are utter garbage. Because, they're based around a lot of this vanity stuff, which is it looks pretty, but does it actually help you generate more sales or more revenue or a better relationship with your customers or more impactful marketing? And the answer is almost always no.
Exactly. A client of mine used the term joysticking, which I've always loved. He says, yeah, you get a dozen different analysts in there joysticking around with the numbers. They can come up with any story they want.
So I think, to illustrate a few different examples of how we look at this idea of, we talked about reporting from a vanity analytics side, but then this idea of managing the unmanageable. And we've certainly talked about ideas around this before. For example, in sales, right? A sales manager, what can they do and what can't they do? And where does this sort of phenomenon of managing the unmanageable impact a sales manager in an organization?
So, sales it's such a wonderful example for this because we know that the sales manager is going to be judged based on how much revenue is produced by their team. It's really the only metric in many companies that is looked at to determine whether a sales manager is doing well. So, by the downward flowing nature of this, the sales manager is going to look at their salespeople and judge them based on how much revenue came into each of their individual accounts. And, there's a lot of problems with this. The most important one, though, is that we can't actually make anybody buy from us. Short of pulling out a gun, there is no way to ensure that we're going to get money from their account into ours. And so managing based on, on how much revenue came in, at best is a backward-looking metric that just tells us what happened rather than what we can influence. And at worst, it incentivizes all the wrong behaviors and doesn't give proper impact to what people can do to make a positive difference.
So, that brings me to an interesting thought is when you and I have worked together, and we certainly have on a number of different projects with different clients, but one of the first things we often find is that they're looking at that. They're looking at how many sales are made, who's doing what, as opposed to things that they can actually influence. And so that's why one of the things we always do really quickly is put tools or process into place to measure and influence activity and to set expectations of the activity, whether it's through the Pick 3 process or, a custom CRM that we've developed, whatever it is. And I find it's shocking to me that how many organizations out there have no clue what their salespeople are doing on a day-to-day basis. And so the sales manager is left with just that simple report of saying, well, Bill did this much last year at this time, so he should be doing this much this year at this time. Meanwhile, Bill's sitting at home watching The Price is Right.
Well, and that's exactly it, right? We can't directly impact, we can't make a client give us money, but we can directly impact Bill and what Bill's doing. We can say, Bill, I see you've only done 2 site visits when everybody else has done 20. Bill, I see you've only picked up the phone 3 times when everybody else has picked it up 300. I see that you're relying completely on email in order to get stuff coming in. And how did you get those 4 accounts? Are those legacy? What the hell's happening here? But if you're not looking at that, if you're not looking at activity, then you really have no basis to judge how effective Bill is or what he's doing other than the top line sales number, right?
The secondary level of that, of course, is the sales manager is being yelled at by senior leadership. And senior leadership is saying, increase sales. We need more sales. The only thing that matters is sales. But the reality is that also does nothing useful for anyone, let alone the sales manager and the people that are working for him. And so it's that same thing, right? It's that managing the unmanageable, worrying about these things as opposed to spending their time, worrying about things that actually matter to senior leadership. Obviously, increasing sales is important, but there's a better way to do it.
Well, and that's a really good thing to bring up there, Noah. We often use the term drowning in data, right? It's not unique to us, certainly, but it's certainly something that we see almost everywhere we go, is the last thing anybody needs is another report if it's not helping them make a decision. In fact, in many cases, what we need to do is go in and pare away 80, 90% of the reports that are taking up their time, the things that they're worrying about that they have no impact over, and helping them answer the question, what is the highest and best use of your time at whatever level they're at? What is the thing that you do that can't be done by somebody at half or a tenth of what it costs to have you on board?
That's really interesting. And I think, one of my favorite things when you and I have talked about this before is how we can apply this to almost every area of the organization. I mentioned their senior leadership. You talked about sales, customer service. I mean, this is the same thing in customer service, right? The customer service manager can't impact how many angry phone calls they're going to get. But what she can manage and what she can help with is the language that each rep uses. And we've talked in other episodes about the idea of the corporately shared script book. Right? And so the way that complaints are handled, the way that challenging situations are handled, it doesn't really matter how many angry phone calls are coming in for that person. What matters is how they're handling them.
Exactly. And, what that leads to is much more effective management that instead of saying, hey, guys, we need to cut the number of angry phone calls somehow, instead, you can put that time and effort into saying, okay, here are the categories that are most likely to come in. And so let's ensure that we're spending 20 minutes a week training on these specifically so that you're prepared for them and you know exactly what to say and how to say it.
Right. And so, just to add on to my comment there because I forgot one important element. The customer service manager, if that person is charged with reducing the number of complaints, you're right. Just looking at a report and saying, hey, last month we had 45 complaints. This month you should only have 20. Aim for 20. We have no control over that. But what we can do is we can build a process, we can put something in place, and we'll talk about tools like the hierarchy of horrors in different other podcasts. But I think, it's just that idea that so what the report says, as long as you can do something meaningful and objectively based with that report. I'm already sensing that we've got another podcast in us very shortly about throwing away a lot of reports and doing, exception reporting and what is good reporting at every level of management. So I'm looking forward to that one. But before we get there, we need to wrap this one up. So I guess, we always like to leave with a challenge. And you alluded to another podcast there to talk about exception reporting, which is an area of intervention that we help so many organizations with. But Shawn, if you had to build this into a challenge, here's what I'm thinking, and you can tell me what you're thinking. We've given some examples here from senior leadership to operations, marketing, customer service, sales. I would ask our listeners to try and think about what reporting or new tools would they need to help them influence their people or manage them in more meaningful and useful ways? Or the flip side of this would be, what reports are they looking at that are simply just vanity analytics? And what can they get rid of? Like your guide where you told us, where he was looking at 150 different reports and said, these are all useless. What can we jettison to improve our day and allow us to focus on things that are more meaningful and useful? Would you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's great. I would just put a little bit of a finer point on it and say that the challenge from my point of view is find 5 reports or 5 pieces of information that you're perusing regularly that you're not immediately making a decision based on those, and get rid of them. Test it out for a month without seeing them, and ask yourself if you're any worse off for not having that information in front of you that regularly. I think what you'll find is that you can start to get rid of a lot of reports this way, free up a lot of time and mental capital.
And I think, again, exception reporting, we will definitely be touching on that in many, many podcasts. It's such an important part of our work, and it ties in very nicely to what we're talking about here. So, Shawn, any last parting words from you?
No, with that, I welcome everybody to take part in the challenge and let us know how you're faring with these challenges and what impacts you're seeing.
So again, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Look at this. We're at 12 minutes and 35 seconds. Again, in under 15 minutes, pragmatic, useful, valuable learning information for your organization's growth. This is fantastic stuff. Please get in touch with us if you have any questions. The best way is to reach us is on my website, noah@noahfleming.com, or just noahfleming.com. And certainly shoot us your messages. We will be back next week with another great episode.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us each and every week for another great episode of The Evergreen Show with your hosts, Noah Fleming and Shawn Veltman. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on The Evergreen Show.